I really don't blame out-of-town people who've come here. I really blame the business community for not being more. I blame myself. Okay, I blame myself. I blame people like me who've been here who should have been more together to demand a certain way, that we should have been looking at legacy. We should be looking at when we're gone, not just for the money we might make right now. It's like, the only thing you take with you from this life is what you give away.
Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary. Welcome to The Hidden City Podcast. Today we are so excited to have a friend, a mentor, our landlord, and
partner as well.
Partner in Tyler Station. Someone we've looked up to for a long time, Monte Anderson. He's been in South Dallas with Options Real Estate for about 35 years and is actually grown up here as well. And so thanks for being on the show, Monte.
Yeah,
Appreciate
great.
it.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Glad to hang out with you guys today.
Yeah.
Always a good time.
Yeah.
So, Monte, you grew up in southern Dallas County.
Yeah.
What part of town did you grow up around here?
I grew up down closer to Polk and Camp Wisdom area, kind of the southern part of Oak Cliff, or what some would say is not Oak Cliff, but the southern part of Oak Cliff. And I've either been in Duncanville, DeSoto, Midlothian, or South Oak Cliff my whole life.
Your entire life. What was it like growing up here?
In the early days here, it was really interesting because we grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, which was all white, during those days. And, we played baseball on the street. I rode motorcycles, raced motocross, things like that. And then one day, it was like a neighborhood where you really had kids playing in the street. You walked to school. We're 6, 7-year-olds. We walked to elementary school, which was about probably a third of a mile away. I would like to say it's 7 miles. We walked 7 miles in the snow.
A third of a mile.
A third of a mile. But you wouldn't let a 6-year-old walk a third of a mile.
That's
right?
a great point. Nowadays,
so
probably not.
And so it was great, walk to school and things like that. And then about the 7th grade, 8th grade, the integration started in the schools and busing. And so I'll never forget this day in my neighborhood. One black family moved in on our street. And everybody on the street put their house up for sale at one time. Every house except my dad. And so my dad said, these are people just like us. They're just trying to find a better place to go to school, a better place to live, and so he was way ahead of his time. My dad was. And so he said, we're staying, this is where we're going to live. And so from that point forward, it was not the greatest of times through integration and busing. It was really rough times. In the end, I think it works out good. Maybe there's some casualties along the way, which were my sisters were one of them. But overall, it was a very rocky time. My friends left. They all moved away. And it was just really different. And so, didn't really encourage me to go to school or do anything. I kind of buried myself in racing motorcycles and kind of. Just that's how I grew up, from that point forward. Just
we've
racing.
heard some stories about that. The bikes. Was that like a passion of yours, or how did you get into that?
Well, my dad was a early motocross racer. My dad mom were 15 and 16 when they had me because I'm the oldest of the kids, and my dad was a motocross racer early in the times in the motocross in the United States. And so I just followed him and, rode from the time I was 5 years old till I was like 22, 23. The last few years I rode professionally and, finally broke a left femur, put a rod in my left leg. And, it was time to grow up. I had 2 kids, so it was time to grow up. You had to make a living. And so, that kind of ended that career. And I actually was going to open up a motorcycle shop down by Redbird Mall. That was really a Yamaha motorcycle shop. And things didn't work out financing-wise and stuff like that. So I went to work for my dad because I had no other skills. And what he did at the time, he sheetrocked malls inside. He sheetrocked back when they were still building malls, So I'd haul sheetrock up and down the road to Louisiana and South Texas and stuff, and it was not a fun. Yeah,
that sounds like heavy labor.
Oh, it was
manual
not a fun
work.
thing. Yeah, it's like we traveled. It's like a pack of, it's like gypsy, contractors would go from mall to mall around the country and live in crappy, cheap motels and trailers and stuff like that. Yeah. It was not a good life, so I never could understand why he couldn't work locally when Texas was like booming.
Yeah.
He said, I can't get any business here in Texas. I can't, I bid it, but I can't get any business. And so I got to thinking, I said, well, why can't you get any business when you don't have any? So I said, I thought to myself, you got to get involved in the community, get involved. So who do we get involved with? Well, the chambers of commerce. Who are they? Let's get involved with them. And that was really the start of my really community involvement, and got involved, buried myself in the chambers of commerce, and made a decision that we would stay home and work close to home and didn't have to travel and all that.
So you kind of influenced your dad in that way to think, hey, we can root ourselves in this community, and that means we also don't have to travel everywhere, but also we can maybe go a little deeper with the impact here.
Yeah, and it was a good thing because malls soon dried up, and quit being built after that. And now today you've seen them, deteriorate, all over the country. Yeah. So, and it made me think about community a lot more at that point. It's like, why did my friends move away? Why did white flight happen? Why did things? And I realized that when people don't love their communities, when you don't love your place, it's real easy to pack up and leave. And so we started thinking about, or I did, thinking about building places that you love, you care about, walkable communities, multi-generational communities, mixed use communities. How do you have places like Jefferson Boulevard, which here in Oak Cliff, I think is one of the best urban streets in all of Dallas.
People don't know about it, and it is hands down our favorite. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Bishop Arch gets all the attention, but Jefferson Boulevard is
that's where it's
best.
at. That's the crown jewel right there. I agree.
Yes, very much. So.
Yeah.
Was there a moment, Monty, like when you started thinking that way? Like, can you remember a specific moment where things changed in your head?
So something happened during that time. What happened was when I was racing motorcycles, I also taught motocross lessons, and I come from a really working class family, and it's this guy. What happened during that period? We had started a motocross association, like a riders union, and I had, back in those days, you didn't have computers and lists. You had to mail things. You had to put stickers on envelopes. And so I met this guy who was in the computer business who could run these things through a thing and put stickers on for you and help you. And he said, look, I'll help you do this with this riders union that you want to form. I'll help you do this if you'll teach my kid motocross lessons for free. And I thought, man, that's just another rich guy that's just taking advantage of a poor guy. And he said, but I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you a book, and I'm going to give you the secret of success. I'm going to give it to you. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I want. I mean, I want, I don't want to be a sheetrock hauler. I want to be a big time something. I want to be something. I want to do something. And he gave me the book Think and Grow Rich, and he said, why don't you read it and tell me what you think? And I read it, and I didn't think anything. I didn't really think about it. And a few years later, it was probably about 5 or 6 years, I broke my leg. I was out of the motocross business. I was having to work, and I was just struggling with everything, a lot of things. Personal things like drugs, alcohol. I mean, just like terrible, times in my life. Just really, life was spiraling. And so I'm looking for things. In not being highly educated, I just figured, okay, well, where do I go? So I go, we didn't have the internet, right? So you go to the library, start looking at old pictures of things, looking for things. I came home, I took books out and books are on the shelf, and I started putting my books on the shelf. And I never really was a big reader. And then all of a sudden one day I came home. That book was one of the books that was on the shelf. And one day I came home and I pulled the book off the shelf and I read the book. And in the first page it said, "When the secret hits you, when it really hits you, you will know it. You'll know." And my goosebumps went over my body. Everything that I'd read came back to me, and I just got it. I got it. And it was this, this key to definiteness of purpose, of deciding what you're going to do and doing it in a method that's really good. And Think and Grow Rich was, I wanted to be rich. That was but the rich that it taught me was so much different than the rich. It was, it is about money. I mean, it is, but it was so much deeper, and the riches were way deeper inside, of personal commitment, community, integrity. I mean, it had so many things,
values,
attitude, values, things, more of my values that I already believed in anyway. But it really was the spark that made me to decide that I was going to commit the rest of my life to Southern Dallas County and only work in Southern Dallas County. And at that point, which was in the 80s, mid 80s, I made a commitment to myself and that I would stay in I would only work and, do the development work and the real estate work or whatever work I was going to do in Southern Dallas County for the rest of my life. And so either that's either just a, trendy thing to say or it's real. But over the last 35 to 40 years now, I've stick with that mission and have stayed with it, stuck to it.
Being in that, I mean, Grant and I were talking earlier, just like, man, everything that Monte's been involved in, from Texas Theater to the Belmont to projects like Tyler Station, it's those are things that people who are starting to move into Oak Cliff or are new to Oak Cliff, they're like, this is legendary stuff. And that happened because you were committed to this area. Yeah. And I think that's it's amazing to see that you've been so focused. I think that's inspiring to Grant and I too, where it's
definitely just the commitment of like, I'm going to stay right here for the rest of my life, and I don't care what happens. Not that you don't care, but you're like, I don't really need to be involved in anything that happens in other parts. Like, this is where I'm going to focus my time and attention. And you get that's a really insane amount of commitment. But it's cool.
It allows for your roots to kind of get deeper and deeper. And I think that's it's something where you a second ago you said people, when they don't care about their neighborhood, it's so easy for them to leave. That kind of reminds me of that kind of thinking a little bit. There's a connection point there where it's like, oh, you start to care about this place more and more. Those roots go deeper and deeper. This thing gets better and better.
Right. Commitment to place, the commitment to anything, to a business, to a craft, to a place, commitment to, your faith, commitment to whatever you have. When you make that commitment, you're half the way there. And when you make that commitment, like long-term, like I did, it changes the way you do business. So in other words, if you're doing real estate deals, if you're committed here for the rest of your life, it's different than committing to a project that's only here to make money today. So that commitment changes. And also, I always say the laws of the universe, God's laws, kind of change around what you do, because it just seems like I got lucky all the time, and just the right things would line up. I mean, the Belmont Hotel came up at the right time. The Texas Theater came up at the right time. Tyler Station here came up at the right time. Other projects that I've done, they just kind of appear at the right time when things are ready. And I promise you this for sure, without a doubt, that it's not because of my smarts and stuff. It's really back to that commitment. It's that old thing of persistence. Yeah. The persistence when always kind of ends up winning, when you're persistent at something, it's just really been amazing how that stuff works. There's a project right now I'm working on. It just came into I can't really say much about it right now, but it's close by, I can tell you that. But it just happened. It just appeared. And these things have been there my whole life, because I lived at Polk and Camp Wisdom, which is south. And then, I had a project at Polk in 67, the Triangle Shopping Center. And then I had at Tyler here, which is Polk, Tyler Station here. And then the Belmont is on Sylvan, which is actually Polk. These are, so that turns into Wycliffe. So I've been going up and down Polk Street and Tyler my entire life,
Yeah.
And all these places are here. They were always here. It's like the things you want, the successes, they're right around you already, and that commitment changes things. I think people have too many options today sometimes, And
Yeah, the ability to, like you were saying a minute ago, you feel like that sometimes it's luck. Certainly, if you're driving down the same two streets for 35 years and seeing those things, it starts people and probably investment gets attracted to you in that because you're there, you're just present, and people know who to come talk to when they want to do a project in that area. One thing, Monte, you've said to us before that has stuck with me is sort of humility when you're up, gratitude when you're down, and you've had ups and downs just like any of us have had in our lives. How has that looked in projects and in life the last 35 years? Can you share some stories?
Yeah. So when I'm most dangerous to myself is when I'm successful. Okay? Because when I'm successful, I can tend to be arrogant, know it all. I can tend to, want it my way only stuff. And so when I'm successful, now I realize this, it's a red flag out in front of me going, danger, you're in danger. Like the old Lost in Space, danger, Will Rogers, as you were saying, danger. And so that means at that point, I have to seek that humility at that point because I'm in dangerous area. I have to remember I'm not that great and I'm not that good. I'm really just a hardworking, guy, from South Dallas. And it's just, you have to be so careful at that point. And I see it all the time. And I actually saw it really clear with the Belmont Hotel when I first did the Belmont Hotel, because the Belmont, I thought, I can build this real estate, I can fix stuff, I can do anything. I can do anything. And we purchased the Belmont and remodeled it and got it going and stuff, and it nearly took me down. It took all my assets. It took, it took my time. It took all my other properties. I thought I was going to go bankrupt. I thought I was. And that was out of somewhat, that problem came out of arrogance. I just thought I could do it. I could do that. And so when you're up, you have the humility. And then when you're down, you got to have gratitude. I passed a guy just on the way over here today who had no legs. Okay. I have two legs. Today. Yeah. I'm grateful for that. I have clothes. I have food. I have a home. I have all of these things. More than I ever deserve. So it keeps me in that middle, that middle area and stuff. And all of my problems have come from, really lack of humility. And over and over, I can just tell you over and over, just, where it, and a lot of my attitude has come from a lack of gratitude, where I've just, I just get, down for something, get mean, get nasty, so some days I just want to be nasty. I just want to be,
Well, that's true of anybody, it's hard to fight those urges, but
Grant has those days.
I get nasty with Doug sometimes.
I've never seen you two guys.
You just come on in. We'll invite you into one of our many fun discussions.
I've never seen you. I've had nice.
It's too funny.
Well, I think, Monte, you're so you've got so much experience in Oak Cliff. I think one of the conversations that's happening right now is very much change has happened in Bishop Arts, and like South Dallas is changing in different areas. How do you keep, and how does Oak Cliff keep its soul, I think, and how does it it's we're kind of blessed with an amazing neighborhood. How do you kind of champion that the best you can? Is a question. Yeah, we're just wondering. Yeah, I love it.
Well, you're right. The bones of this North Oak Cliff neighborhoods. All the ones around here at Tyler Station and Edgefield and Winnetka and Kessler and all these neighborhoods. Many others. The Polk neighborhood. The neighborhoods east of 35 too. Yeah. There's just some great. There's just all kinds of really great neighborhoods here. and the retail was done around those neighborhoods. And the only thing that destroyed a lot of those neighborhoods were the freeways that came through that created the haves and the have-nots. And we've all talked about that. And the gentrification right now, which is the word that nobody nobody likes. Nobody. But we actually set policy that actually caused it to happen in Bishop Arts. Now, I think I have something I call gentlefication. Okay, and gentlefication is where the locals get the ownership. So how do you do that? Let's talk about Elmwood. Bishop Arts is already. We changed the policy. We changed the zoning. We incentivized going tall, and today, rare are the local entrepreneurs. Are more rare today, and it's people from, and it's don't get me wrong, I still love Bishop Arts. They're my favorite places. I go to Oddfellows and Eno's and Encina, and those are my go-to places still. I still love all those places. But if you did these two things, here's two things to keep the soul. First of all, you put a lid on the height. You put a lid on it. 2 stories. I'd say 2 stories, especially in Elmwood. Yeah. I would say 2 stories on Elmwood, and you do not let the developers create super blocks out of the little lots. You make sure all the lots are kept small, just like they are. Don't change them. I mean, you can change them, but it would be a rare case where you would maybe fix. And so you got all these little buildings. And 2 things happen. First of all, the big developers can't come in and make any money out of that. It's got to be all local developers. It'll be local. And the prices won't go up, so they won't go up so fast, and kind of it's kind of a fake increase really quick. They all go up, and that's what happened in Bishop Arts when they went to 6-story zoning and they put the TIF in place. All the land went up to $50 a square foot from like
immediately.
10. Immediately, and all the locals were out. Nobody local could hardly. If you didn't already have it, you couldn't do it. Now, if you do that in Elmwood, the same thing will go up. And so what you do is keep a lid on it and keep the lot small. And then small developers and small entrepreneurs, locals, and you know this yourself. You know this for yourself. They need 2 things. And this is building really middle-class wealth. They need a decent loan and cheap equity. In other words, a cheap down payment. And that not for free, no incentives. Just cheap money, and they can make it. And that's not the way our world works. It's like we incentivize the big developers with tax, credits and grants and things like that, and then the locals, they get washed out. And it's happened in West Dallas, and it's happened in North Oak Cliff, and I have this, I like North Oak Cliff. I love North Oak Cliff. I don't like what's happened over there. And not all of the developers are bad. I don't blame the developers, and I really don't blame city council people. I really don't blame out-of-town people who've come here. I really blame the business community for not being more. I blame myself. Okay, I blame myself. I blame people like me who've been here who should have been more together to demand a certain way, that we should have been looking at legacy. We should be looking at when we're gone, not just for the money we might make right now. It's like, the only thing you take with you from this life is what you give away, and that would be something that you would do. You would kind of give that away. You're kind of like, I'm not going to make this big money selling this stuff off. What I'm going to give away is I'm going to keep this, keep a lid on it. And then here's the thing about keeping a lid on it too, in small spaces, small restaurants, you don't need big parking lots. You can nearly always park on the street. And some of the best places in the country, like South Beach, Florida, are 1.5 square miles with 50,000 people. It's like all 2-story buildings and no parking lots. Now there's some new ones that have cropped in, but those
you can
places,
make it work without the parking lots.
You can park on the streets, and you don't actually don't need cars. Because you're compact, and you're walkable, and
it takes a change in mindset, and it's so deeply rooted in our, like you said, policy and even just American culture. I mean, there's so many pieces to that. But you're right. We don't need it. We don't have to have massive parking lots. There's a different way, a better way.
Yeah. And when is enough? For us to have money? I mean, when is enough? You know, it's like, it's conscious capitalism, you know. My friend in South Bend, you know, Mike Keene, he's claimed socialist, okay, over here, you know, and here I'm a capitalist over here, you know, and so as we've gotten to be better friends and he's a professor and you know, and so as we gotten to be better friends, he calls himself now a market rate socialist, and I'm a conscious capitalist. So we're only this far apart.
You guys are right there in the middle together.
Just really close.
Back to the middle. Always go back to the middle.
Because he realized he's got to make money.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise, the government can't keep funding, you know, our projects and stuff. You know, they can't. You know, and I've taken government money to do projects. I've done economic development incentives and stuff. I don't like it. I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
I don't think it's healthy long term. There is a place for government incentives and infrastructure and sidewalks and parks and schools. And you know, just something doesn't feel right to me about incentivizing developers. It seems to create odd things to come on the earth that shouldn't have been there otherwise if they didn't have those things. So,
well, you definitely have a unique, I think, approach to development, or at least a different one than a lot of developers. It seems like that we might hear about. One of the things I love about the way you approach development is, you look at things through a creative lens. You look for opportunities to use, let's say, for example, a house in a new way that addresses density questions, or you might look at a factory building that has 110,000 square feet, but maybe could be used by 50 businesses rather than 2.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where do you think that sort of thinking comes from, Monty?
You want the unicorn and rainbow answer, or the real?
I want the real one,
the real
Monty.
answer,
Come on,
Monty. The real
so
answer.
here's I'll tell you the first one from like the real estate developer, and then I'll talk to you about the town maker part of me, the town maker, and the 12. We'll talk about that. So first thing is you look at this property, and I looked at it for a long time. I mean, I actually, as a real estate agent, had it listed at one point.
Tyler Station.
Yeah, for the lady that owned it, and nobody really wanted it except for apartment developers, and they wanted to tear it down. And it has contaminated soil here. When we purchased it, it had, I think there was 9 monitoring wells monitoring the gases still here from a 20-something year mitigation, that went on here from when the latest people that had it, the Dixie Co. group that had it, they were contaminating the creek and they were contaminating air, and the Elmwood neighbors got together and actually got it shut down. And so they put monitoring wells to monitor the gases and the groundwater and all those things. And so nobody wanted it. They wanted it next to the rail station, light rail station. Huge plus. I mean, $1 billion system right here next door. A mile from Bishop Arts. I mean, it's great location. Industrial zone surrounded by residential neighborhoods, like really unique, property used for manufacturing. Of course, wax paper was invented here. Due to wax space, it's named after of course, from you guys. But and looking at it, if you tore it down, you had to haul all that dirt off, contaminated dirt. But if you didn't tear it down, there was no further action from the state of Texas, from the environmental quality people. You didn't have to tear it down. So you had to figure out how to use the building. And you really couldn't use it for residential. You couldn't turn it into like a loft apartment. So it's like this process of elimination. In fact, in our 12 steps of town making, which my other company called Neighborhood Evolution, we teach the 10 deal killers. It's stuff like title, survey, environmental, zoning, financing, insurance, all the deal killers. Those are, and that's one of the, so you eliminate like all the deal killers and you go, what's left? So it can't do apartments, really. You can't do this. You can't do that. Can't tear it down. So what's left? So my friend, Gary Buckner, who's one of our partners here at Stash, Gary and I had been talking about this maker space all these years. We've been talking about it for a long time. We put all makers in here, guys like him, welders and candlestick makers and woodworkers and all that. And so we thought, well, all right, this may be the place. And this has got to be full of makers. It's zoned industrial. We didn't think about it being co-working space or studios or brewery or any of that kind of stuff at that time. We thought it would really be. And so we bought the property, and decided we'd divide it up. So by dividing it up into small spaces, we could get a higher price per square foot. So we could still lease people something for $700 or $800 a month, but get like that, $16, $20 a square foot that we needed range. So we could still get, the developer needs the high per square foot. Okay, the neighborhood, the occupant needs a low dollar.
Right.
So small spaces, high per square foot, low dollar makes the numbers work, and we divide it up that way. When we got started, the first thing that happened, we had, like an advertising company come over here and rent some space. Said, we want some space up here. We are an advertising company. We want to be here. And then next thing you know, we had, a barber come along.
Yeah.
And said, we want to be here. And then you had these other two guys with their previous wax space guys who wanted to do, co-working and wanted to do. And then you had all of a sudden, we had very few makers. Well, we have a whole bunch of makers because we have tattoos and we have candles and we have pottery and we have lots of makers still, but they're more retail. And then we have a lot more film and podcasting and photographers. You guys came along as photographers. That was what you with TX Studio and so we had people like that started coming along and say, wait a minute, there's something here. And where are these people coming from? You know where they were coming from? Within like a quarter mile around the building. They were coming from the neighborhood. It's like, wait a minute, this is really a neighborhood hub. And, oh, by the way, when you made this thing safe, people came over and walked through here and rode the DART. So DART's ridership went up. They didn't expect this train station to have any success. DART on their list, they told me that there would be, like very few people ever get on and off at this train station here. And now today it's become, like 3 times what it was before we started. So it kind of told us what it wanted to be itself. It's kind of corny, but the building kind of told us what we wanted to be. And we had a certain amount of money we could spend, and so we had to make do with that money, and therefore the cattle panels as dividers and, open ceilings. And I'd had office buildings in the past where every time somebody left, you had to replace the carpet and the sheetrock. Yep. They'd change walls and stuff. And so we made these spaces that didn't have carpet, and you didn't have to change all that out. And it can actually make money. We're an office building. We spent all our money on finish out and commissions and that kind of thing. And so these buildings kind of tell you what they want. If you listen to the neighborhood, if you listen to the, to the building, you kind of pay attention, and it'll kind of lines itself up for you. And it happens better if it's incrementally. So, we finished one space out, finished another, it took a couple of years, and you finish these spaces out. Yeah. And you kind of listen to the market and finish it the way it tells you to do it. Yeah. And today, as it stays up in the upper 90% occupied nearly all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. We got different people coming in all the time. Yeah. A ceramics group just joined, and the people who do the plants at Black Space, they got a space. It's fun seeing it continue to keep that life growing and going. Yeah. So, Monte, I feel like every time Grant and I get together and hang out with you for, I don't know, whatever, if it's meetings or a meal or whatever it is, we feel like we get good Oak Cliff Monte stories. and I feel like you can throw a rock and hit anything in Oak Cliff, like a charcoal boiler place, or I don't know, like
you guys remember when we
got the charcoal box, another one of our staples.
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember when you took it. We went there.
Where was it
for? That was years ago.
It was like your
we call it the cow. I just call it the cow.
The cow. Yeah, the cow.
That's what Bettina called it too.
That's so funny. But I mean, I think it's interesting because Oak Cliff is huge. It's like big. It's a lot of people think sometimes like, hey, it's just this little neighborhood, and I'm like, no, there's lots of neighborhoods within this thing, and so, but there's it feels like a lot of new people coming in all the time, and so, I think that's, what are maybe some of those stories that come to mind that have just been here for so long that are worth sharing?
As a kid being from South Oak Cliff and coming up, when we say South Dallas, South Oak Cliff, that means down I-35 to me. South Dallas is actually southeast. Fair Park. Yeah. That's what we call South Dallas. So just to clarify. When we were kids, my parents, my mom used to bring us down to Jefferson Boulevard. I mean, I'm talking about 7, 8-year-old kids and just drop us off.
Really?
And leave. Can you imagine? You got kids.
No.
You got kids.
I probably should let
Can you
just
imagine?
run around. Yeah.
And so we'd go to the Texas Theater and Bernie's Hobby Shop and stuff, and then we would shoplift up and down. Up and down Jefferson at Sears, and so we were heathens.
So y'all were running around Jefferson as kids.
Kids.
That's so fun.
Going in, you have like $1.50. To go to the show, the Texas Theater.
But it was alive and well. I mean, you were
slot car racing, slot car racing.
Downstairs.
They had it at Bernie's Hobby Shop upstairs. They had a slot car racing. It's like,
it's amazing.
Of course, Oswald was, home was in Oak Cliff.
All this
allegedly shot Kennedy because I don't believe he did.
That's gonna be a whole episode at some point.
Yeah,
like
Sears
Jefferson
was where Fiesta was, and it was up close to the road. And it had the storefronts, with the.
I've heard this from Jefferson is there was someone said this at one point, but it was like, so goes Jefferson, so goes Oak Cliff. Like it was really a heart or a heartbeat or a beating center of like this thing. And so when I asked like, how is Oak Cliff? It's so cool to hear. It's like, oh, we would just spend time going up and down Jefferson as kids growing up.
The Army Navy store was there. You had blue jeans back then. You wore bell-bottom blue jeans from the hippie movement. You had the record stores. Back then you had the record store still there. With Brock and them. Run the record store and the theater. You had. When you went to Keys Park, you played, baseball all day. You had, you just. Back then, even Keys Park, you had a circle. You could just drive through there, and as you got a car in the older days, you drove through there to pick up girls or guys. So it was the Astro Drive-In over on Loop 12. That's where I had my first date. Stuff. At the Astro Drive-In.
That's awesome.
So, but it was. It was such a wholesome, good place, and it really is like that again now. The new people seem to want that and come in, especially like the Elmwood bunch over here is more, that really vibe that I would say you had, in the 60s and 70s, that same, looking for that same thing. We actually weren't even conscious of it back then because the development was just good. It was just pretty decent, back then. Suburban sprawl had started south and was not so good, but the neighborhoods up here were intact, and they were, there was Kid Springs, you had the pools, you had public pools back then, you had, Lake Cliff, was just a dynamic, park, which it still is. Such a beautiful place, even as it is today, know, and so, it was so, it was really like we're trying to make it again now. It's really like, really odd, but you're trying to have, family-friendly places to go. And of course, in 1958, they outlawed alcohol out of Oak Cliff.
That's right. It became a dry.
You got to go all the way down Irving Boulevard to get that.
And then, I'm not sure, because that's about the time I was born, but I'm not sure what all happened there, but it was dry here for years and years. You couldn't, even when we first did the Belmont, we had a private club license, even
that's the way you got around that.
And so it seemed like a lot of the restaurants, a lot of things, I guess moved from that time, but it was also the white flight thing moved, and that, that happened. I mean, Bishop Arts was cabinet shops were in the fronts. They were in the storefronts.
Right.
There were.
Yeah, it wasn't really a thing at that point in time.
Until Ricky Tillman's Corner became, came and the Bishop Grill was down there where Hunky's is now. Actually, it was in a little house before Hunky's. And Bishop Grill was open from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day, and that's it. And they were closed like on holidays and closed for 2 weeks
whenever
in the summer.
They wanted. Yeah.
And they had chicken fried steak and banana pudding and these unbelievable rolls, and people stood outside, down the street. You had to get there at like 10:30 to get in, And then if you're sitting 4 people at a booth, so if you and I were sitting in a booth and these 2 guys came in we didn't know, you had to scoot over and let them in.
Sit down at the booth.
Every chair you had to sit with
That is
people.
awesome.
And then if you just got through eating and you're sitting there drinking your tea or whatever, people eye you, from the line.
Get out of here.
Bishop Grill.
And it was great. It was Bishop Grill. Yeah, it was really, a good place. McLean's Honda on Jefferson. I worked there as a kid. It's a Honda motorcycle shop. It was, incredible. And there was just so many things, on Davis and these streets. My grandmother lived on Kings Highway. My uncle lived on Windermere. So our families lived, spread out in these areas, and so it was really, really good. And I see the communities of Oak Cliff really returning to that. I mean, I see Oak Cliff is a special place in the fact that I think that your family's here. You're too, and you're making that same. It's kind of the same thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I think about. I mean, you go around the country and speak a lot on some of those development principles that you've created and become an expert in. How, and even, this is funny, but like explaining it to other people in Dallas, like how do you describe Oak Cliff? Because sometimes I'm always like, hey, it's a neighborhood in Oak Cliff, but it just doesn't feel like it's the right answer. Or it's a neighborhood in Dallas, but it doesn't feel like the right way to describe it. Like, how do you explain it to people when you're...
Well, first of all, you know what an expert is, right?
Yeah, what?
An X is a has-been, a spurts drip under pressure. So. People at the Belmont, when we were on Fort Worth Avenue, they used to call and they go, well, what kind of neighborhoods are around there? And this is when it was the only thing over there. Say, and people at the front desk go, what kind of neighborhood is this? And is it middle class? Is it upper? Is it like lower class? And they couldn't explain it. And I said, so I would have to get on the phone and go, look, it's up and coming.
There you go.
But I would describe it as like Oak Cliff was originally a suburb of Dallas.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was sub-urban, not suburban. Mm. It was suburban. And in the context of what I've learned through the Congress of New Urbanism, through CNU.org, CNU, through urbanist principles, they have what they call the transect, and the transect is when you divide different areas up, like downtowns are highly dense, and then the next areas are like an uptown and it's medium dense, and then you have an Oak Cliff, it's less dense, and then you have more suburban, it's less dense, and then you have rural, and so there's certain principles you build in each of those sections, and the principles that Oak Cliff was built on by its early designers and the business people back then. Yeah. The business people that designed and built Oak Cliff, they built just like unbelievable neighborhoods that they loved. Mm. They built it with love. They built it with, they built with care for 100. I mean, they built it for us. Yeah. They're long gone. I mean, they understood that the only thing they take with them is what they leave behind. A lot of them did. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe, that's what we're at again with people your age and even a little younger. You guys tell me, but this is what I see in you. It's like, you don't want to just work for money. I see that, and I'm hopeful in our young people today. There's my granddaughter's one that's 18 right now, Abby. So I see that as we're working for something more than just money. We want to build, and I see a lost art maybe emerging, with that and these neighbors. So I would describe Oak Cliff as like, at one point a perfect place to live. That are there places we can improve? Maybe neighborhood nodes like Elmwood and parts of other South Dallas that we need to concentrate on rebuilding, and not just all in Bishop Arts. Mm-hmm. See, we need to concentrate these nodes, these retail nodes in the middle of these neighborhoods. And these are the old streetcar perfect grid neighborhoods anyway. Yeah. So they were set up like that, where you'd have the main retail district. I mean, downtown was Jefferson, and you had a Bishop Arts node, and you had an Elmwood node, and you had a Wynwood node. Wynwood was one of the first malls, around. And so you had these nodes that made it walkable. Anybody could walk to the store, you could do. And so I think it's like a perfect area. It's like one of those perfect neighborhoods. But there's certain principles that you need to realize when you build those. And we lost that art of building, probably before, World War II. Actually, after World War II, when people coming home from the war needed housing, and freeways were being built to cheap land, and you could go out, and gas was cheap, and you could go out and build. And people wanted to get out of the city, which were more high crime and dirty at the time. And that's where the suburban.
Yeah.
So that retrofitting of suburbia now is a big deal. What I'm working on a whole lot of. So
it's sort of like going back to what was built then.
Back to the future. Yeah.
Yeah, back to the future. Like
new urbanism is actually old urbanism. It's just old urbanism. It's just built in a modern context.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about those sort of timeless principles of building in neighborhood building. It's something that is historic. It's not something new.
Right.
Well, so speaking of timeless, I mean, you spent 35 plus years doing development in Southern Dallas County. You've seen Oak Cliff over the years change, go through good times, bad times. We were talking about kind of what it's like now. I'd be curious, Monty, from your perspective, what do you think the next 35 plus years looks like here in this area?
Some days I have more hope than others. I do have hope, actually.
Yeah.
I do have hope. It doesn't always probably seem like that, because it's easier as you get older to be pessimistic, and to be angry. It's easier. It's easier not to have the attitude of anything is possible I had when I was 20 years old. So I pretend all the time I'm in my developments, because I'm doing more projects today than I ever did. So I'm doing more. So I still think I'm 20. So I still I'm going to operate like that till the day I just die. Out doing a deal or something. So just one day you'll just die. That's how I want to go. Yeah. It really is how I want to go. But I'm hopeful in this fact that we like to teach in Neighborhood Evolution, which is this other company I talked about. We've written the 12 steps of town making, which thanks to you guys, we use your space to have those meetings here. And now those meetings are in Kansas City, and they're in South Bend, and they're in Lafayette, and they're in Buffalo, and they're in Sabinal, Texas, and Denton, Texas. And
it's amazing. It's just growing
support groups of supporting each other with 12 steps of town making, which can be done by just anybody. But I think that the next 35 years, and one of the philosophies that we talk about is the most important thing on this earth, like right here, and the most important thing is like the blood in our body. Money is like blood. Okay, we got to have blood to not be dead, and you got to have money. So the most important thing is making money, but doing good is equal on this. Okay, I didn't say doing good is the most important thing. Money is equal. I said making money, because if we're not making money, that we're not going to be able to do good. So it's this balance of conscious capitalism and
market-driven socialism.
These things. So so I have hope because of a lot of the younger people that I meet and I see today, if they can stick with it, it's that idealism you have when you're 18 and you're in college, and you're coming, and it's like, I'm going to save the world. And my hope is that they can keep that thought. They can keep that thought. I'm going to save the world. But to actually realize that money is important, you got to have the money's got to pay. The government can't fund us. It won't work. They try. It doesn't, so we got to have that,
resilience.
It's that teaching. It's of teaching people to fish, not giving them fish, and to teach somebody to fish, it's like casting the fishing line is like a minute. When you're teaching somebody to fish, what are you doing 90% of the time? You're talking. You're spending time with people. And and that's the real secret sauce. The real of the elderly and the elders and the young collaborating and working together. And I think I see a shift. I really do see a shift. I see it in even baby boomers like myself coming to me and said, a long time ago, we'd grown up together like guys with Trammell Crow or big companies or big real estate funds. and they building big warehouses and office building, gigantic apartments and things like that. And they come to me now these days and they go, you know, we wish we would have taken your path because this other stuff is just meaningless. It has no soul in it. It has no, and at the end of our days, you know, at the end of our days when we're lying on our deathbed, and we're all got to be doing that. I mean, somebody else is going to own this building someday. My car's got to be in the junkyard, right? I mean, it's got to, you know, when the end of the day, you know, how much money you had in the bank, how much stuff. I mean, what did it really mean? I mean, what was your purpose? You know, like I have this fear, like my granddaughters who are coming up now, one's got to be an architect and one's got to be a real estate developer in there. And it's really, I never thought that would happen, but it's happening.
That's cool.
That one day they'll get to be 40 years old and I'm still alive maybe. And they come to me and they ask me, they say, you know, this question is, what was it all about? You built these crappy shopping centers, these bad properties and stuff. Was it just about the money? Did you think about leaving us anything? Did you think about leaving us something? And I'm going to be able to say, yeah, we did. You know. Yeah. So, so that's something I deal with. You know, like every day. Think about that. You know, I'm not building anything else for me right now.
Right.
It's over. I mean, it's not what we're putting in place right now. Is for your kids, your grandkids, you know, my grandkids and stuff, and we're putting it in place for them. And so I think that collective consciousness, as bad as things are in the country right now and stuff, I think in our area right here in Oak Cliff, I think we're maybe as enlightened and collectively thinking as anywhere I've been, anywhere. And other places are doing it, but that gives me hope that we actually care about each other. We actually will negotiate for the other guy or gal. So we would actually do that. That it's a win-win. You know, it's truly, truly, truly not just as saying it, but a true win-win.
Nice.
When I sold the Belmont, you know, it sold to some guys and ended up being in the hands of, you know, very wealthy people that really, you know, I don't want to talk bad about them because I don't stand in their shoes, you know, and I don't know their story or their journey, you know, so I really don't want to say bad stuff about them. Yeah. But I know this. I learned a lesson there, and that's why, you know, I'm glad you guys are my partners, and Gary, you know, Gary Buckner is our partner, and Matt, and, you know, others that will be, because I'm hoping that Tyler Station, when I'm gone here, that Tyler Station will be in your hands, the guys who actually deserve it, the guys who actually created the vibe, the gals who are actually in the neighborhood working to make this neighborhood work at your work at Oak Cliff and at your companies and all of that stuff. And that is the legacy that I want to see.
Dang, Monte. Well, thank you. I mean, that means the world to us for you to say it like that. And yeah, we hope we can kind of follow in the footsteps of what you've done here and keep the whole thing moving down the tracks. So thanks for all of that you've been to us as a mentor, and obviously we'll be back for more conversations hopefully in this room. But
sure.
But yeah, thank you for the work that you've done.
We appreciate you, Monte.
Thank y'all. Yeah, thank y'all very much.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, and thanks so much for tuning in.